Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far.
So far, so good. How about you, Tanya?
Doing great. Enjoying a little bit of that thing we call sun.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, getting the vitamin D while we can. So
You may hear it in the background. We are enjoying a little bit of what we call Old Town construction. So apologies if there's a lot of noise.
All right. Well, we will definitely get to the headlines and hopefully get the least amount of background as possible. Well, Thad, why don't you tell us what's coming to the cover story of this week's journal?
Yeah, Tanya, this week we have a great story from Kim Weir, our digital editor, updating us on the Condor reintroduction project going on. This is... It's always a fun one when Kim writes about condors because it is a secret. Well, I don't know that it's so secret, but it is an obsession of hers. She loves watching the Condor cam and getting all of the little updates, and has become quite attached to these big, ugly birds, candidly. But but there's some big news on that front. Actually, today, the next batch of condors, so three juvenile condors that were brought up to the North Coast from the Los Angeles Zoo, are set to be released into the wild to join the cohort of 8 that are already out and about on the North Coast. This is, of course, a part of the UROC-led effort to reintroduce the California condor to the North Coast, which is kind of the northern end of its ancestral territory.
Really exciting story. And although I've been apprised of some of the difficulties they faced, I was really stunned to learn some of the difficulties I was unaware of, such as the lead ammunition.
Yeah, that is the kind of believed to be the single biggest threat to reintroducing condors here. And so just a little bit of background, I mean, the California condor population had dwindled down to, I think it was 22 in the wild before they decided to capture those birds, bring them into captivity, and start kind of a breeding effort and a reintroduction effort. And so now I think their numbers total 350. They are what Kim, I think, very accurately describes as apex scavengers. So these are gigantic birds, and they, subsist primarily by breaking down the carcasses of large mammals, either found washed up on the beach or out in the wild. And with in today's day and age, a significant number of those remains are the result of hunters, if not poachers. And so California has introduced a lead ammunition ban, so it is now illegal to hunt anything in California with lead-based ammunition. And if you are a hunter and unsure about what ammunition is safe to use, please see the online version of the story. It links to the CDFW website, which has a list of all approved ammunition that is safe to use. But while the law has changed, a lot of people's practices have not. And so we actually got word, I believe a couple weeks ago, that one of the condors, A6, was suffering lead poisoning and had been actually taken out of the wild into the Sequoia Park Zoo for treatment. And once they started the effort of treating A6, they tested the other condors and found that 5 of them had traces of lead in their system. So this is a huge threat to condors, and especially their ability to to reproduce in the wild, as the lead poisoning has a big impact on the reproductive health.
I think that's important information to get out there, and I encourage everybody to go to that website and make sure that they are hunting safely for the reintroduction of these majestic carrion birds.
I will say the silver lining of that news, though, while that was a scary situation, is that there are that is one of the signs that that this cohort that was previously reintroduced is starting to acclimate to life in the wild, and they are starting to forage food on their own, whereas previously they had only been eating kind of food left out for them by Yurok biologists. So that's a huge step. It's just incumbent on all of us human neighbors to these condors to make sure that there's no lead out there or no lead contaminated carcasses for them to feed on.
That's the least that we can do in the wake of trying to bring back a practically decimated species. Do we have any final thoughts before shifting to the other news story that we're highlighting?
No, just that I think it's an awesome project, and it's a project that has been spearheaded by the Yurok tribe, which to which the condor is is a sacred species and holds a really significant place of cultural significance. So it's a neat project, and it's one that I think we can all feel good about, and I still am waiting for the day that I'm out and about and see a condor flying overhead with its 10-foot wingspan. It'd be pretty incredible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Thad, can you share what else is coming to the journal this week?
Yeah, so this week I also covered a developing story at Cal Poly Humboldt, where for really, I mean, since I can remember, there's been a cohort of students, a very small cohort of students, who have chosen kind of alternate living situations. And so, for instance, I'm dating myself, but when I was in school there 20 years ago, I remember I had a classmate who was camping in the woods while attending school. And specifically this semester, there's a group of, I think it's about 15 students who are living in vehicles, RVs and vans in campus parking lots. And for reasons that are still a little bit unclear, the university decided a couple weeks ago on October 25th that it was going to notice them and notice the campus community that this was a violation of campus policies, which it is. Campus policies have been on the books since at least 2016, outlawing sleeping in vehicles on campus. But kind of out of nowhere to these students, the university announced that it was taking enforcement action and that they would have to vacate the campus parking lots by November 12th. And so for these students, I was able to catch up with two of them. This is just incredibly disruptive coming in the middle of the semester. One of these students is, I think, like 6 weeks from graduation. And now has to contemplate moving, finding another kind of safe place to live while completing her studies. And so there's just a lot of confusion about kind of why now. And these two students I talked to, Maddie Martiel and Brad Butterworth, both said that Brad Butterfield. They both said that they spoke to, campus police and campus parking personnel before deciding to locate their RVs on campus to see if this was okay. And essentially what they were told is that this was a policy that wouldn't be enforced. And, kind of as long as they weren't bothering anybody else, nobody was going to bother them. And so they're currently working to try to find some kind of reprieve from the situation. A kind of developing thing that we didn't get into this week's journal, but we'll be updating online, is the Cal Poly Humboldt Academic Senate passed a kind of voice of the Senate resolution yesterday, which is kind of a statement of ideals, but basically asking President Tom Jackson Jr., who has discretion over this, to at least give these students till the end of the school year. Kind of saying that not only is it unfair to ask them to move mid-semester, but that even asking them to do so next semester is potentially really really problematic with their efforts to get an education.
Especially while housing for students is so cumbersome. I mean, that's been covered multiple times. And I definitely hope that they can come to some kind of agreeable compromise for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like, housing in the community is really hard to get and really expensive. And then housing on campus, it turns out there are available beds on campus, but they're not cheap. I think the numbers we quote in the story is it's $6,000 to $11,000 to live on campus for a school year. And Brad, who I spoke to, but actually both Brad and Maddie said, they were very this isn't a lifestyle choice for them. This is something that enabled them to continue their education. And so Brad, was very clear that he would not have been able to afford to pay both tuition and housing here. And the only way he figured that it was feasible was to kind of invest the little amount that he had saved into buying a vehicle that he could live in to come up here for his final couple semesters. And similarly, Maddie said, who's been in school for I think 7 or 8 years now, that she finally kind of realized that she couldn't work full time and make the most of her education at the same time. And so really trying to push through and finish her degree and really get the most out of it. She's an environmental studies major. She figured that, she could for a year or two live out of her vehicle and kind of devote herself full time to her studies to maximize her education. So this is just, really kind of upending their worlds right now.
Well, thank you for that story, Thad. I look forward to the updates as they come, and I encourage people to pick up their copy of the North Coast Journal and read the entire stories.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you, Thad. And now let's turn our attention to Jennifer and find out what's happening on the arts and features beat, including a story that made me cry this week.
I know. Should we get that out of the way first?
Let's start with the tears. I agree with you.
So I want to point out that when I asked Linda Stansberry to do this piece, I asked her to write about dance class. I was like, I want a story about what it's like to go take a local dance class. But that evolved. And in fact, what she came back with was something really fantastic. So the title of the story is Lobster Girl Finds the Beat. It's okay if you're confused. What she's talking about is the experience of going to a dance class in the middle of a really tough time. And anybody who's been through, and I think actually after these pandemic years, I think we can all relate to this. But if you've been through a difficult time, grief, breakups, feeling isolated, there are some of us who go into what she describes as lobster mode. And she particularly talks about being the eldest daughter in a family and the kind of extra responsibilities and the real pressure to not fold. And she talks about it being like a little armored lobster at the bottom of the sea where no one can reach you and you're just going through the motions of your life and just trying to not collapse under the massive pressure of the ocean. I was just overwhelmed with it reading, and I may have released a human tear at some point. I also laughed. There were some parts where she talks about watching herself as though, floating above and watching, Lobster Girl go to work, watching Lobster Girl do this and that, and Lobster Girl in dance class, clicking her little claws. It's very sweet. Did it make me kind of want to eat lobster? It did. Okay, I said it. But it's a really beautiful story, and I think it is also a story about, finally letting yourself be and letting yourself be, shedding your shell a little bit. And she says something really lovely. I spoil nothing by sharing something that comes toward the end, where she describes thinking to yourself, what a waste that I was so covered and so armored. And I could have been sharing all of this joy, all of this sort of relaxed happiness with the world. And it's lovely. And it doesn't come to the idea of I'll never be Lobster Girl again. But I think her description of Lobster Girl, I think there are lots of us crustaceans out there who can relate. And I just think it's a really strong piece that I hope everybody reads.
I agree. And it was poignant, and the descriptions were something that I think all of us, especially after the years that we've just gone through, can relate to. So everyone needs to read.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And speaking of high art out there, Tigger Bouncer Custodio is again reviewing some drama for us this week. Not just drama, but theater drama. And although I should probably see if he'll do that. In this case, it is The Life of Galileo, which is interesting because I'm not a person who knows a lot about Bertolt Brecht. But if you are a theater person, I think what he talks about in this review is about the epic style, the Brechtian epic style of theater, and its, its powers, its shortcomings, etc. And he talks about how this was, in a way, like a master class in that form. Like you can watch this and it's educational to see what this style of theater can do. It's big. It sometimes breaks that fourth wall of, when you believe you are really in someone's living room, right? People break character. There are kind of big themes, overt political messaging and things like that. And it's a really interesting kind of theater that I don't think we've seen a lot of on the North Coast of late. So it was a cool review. There was some controversy related to the casting of not a professor, but an instructor, assistant professor, I think. My apologies for getting that wrong. Troy Lesher. But it is an interesting, the end result is really interesting, and Tigger has a lot to say about it, and you should check it out.
And it sounds like everybody had at least two parts in the play, so this
is a Brechtian thing, from my understanding, is that you might have like a dozen parts.
As an old theater kid, that's still quite a lot of work. So I definitely think everyone should check out that hard work.
Yeah, that's true. These people are putting in the work. We got to go clap.
Go clap. Go check it out. And then you also brought me some amazing news to the table this week.
Are you a fan of Guatemalan cuisine?
I love Guatemalan cuisine, especially when they're catering to the more half vegetarian people, such as myself.
Vegetarians, yes. So I don't have a ton of experience with Guatemalan food in particular. So this was a real educational experience for me, and there are some really cool things happening. So let me tell you how it started. It started because the nerds over at the game shop, role-playing game shop on 5th Street, were somebody texted me and was like, hey, it's a Guatemalan place, just opened up the street. You got to go there and have a tamale. And I was like, all right. I get lots of messages from people who are like, you got to try this thing. You got to try that thing. And I was like, all right, I'll go over. And they're kind of awesome. So thank you, Pedro. I went over to Guatemalan Yum Yum. That name is hilarious and will never be not hilarious to me. It's so sweet and so cheerful that you have to know you're just going to be happy when you go in there. And I tried some of the things that are going on in there, one of them being the chuchito. I spoke to the proprietress, whose name is Astrid, Astrid Calderon, and she explained to me that the chuchito, which is it looks like it's just a little tiny, like a half tamale, right? Or tamal, but in fact, it's a bit denser, and it has a very nice light sauce with it, and it comes with a little bit of cheese over the top. She was saying that despite its size, she said that and an atole drink, the sort of warm, milky, creamy, sweet drinks made out of, they have rice, oatmeal, and corn. And they're wonderful. I had one yesterday. It was a little chilly out, and I had my chichito and my atole, and I must tell you, she's not kidding. If you have that for breakfast, it will hold you over. Like, you will make it to lunch. You'll be all right. So behold, the tiny little chichito. It means little dog. Isn't that cute?
So cute.
And then they have a bunch of stuff that is particularly Guatemalan. And the Guatemalan cuisine is very heavily based in Mayan culture, right? So it's the sort of heartland of Mayan culture. So lots of corn. But there's also, of course, the Spanish colonized. So there's some Spanish influence. And then there's also influence from their neighbors in Central America, including El Salvador. So there are pupusas, but the pupusas are different. So just because you had pupusa San Miguel yesterday doesn't mean you can't have a pupusa at Guatemala tomorrow. It is really different. Like the masa is more flavored. And what I really liked is the little bits of the filling that kind of break out of the skin and cook against the grill. If you are a person who likes the little like grilly bits at the edge of meat, or the little bit of cheese that comes out of a quesadilla, that's right where you live. And yeah, it is a little bit different. And they have different sauces. Astrid described it as being a milder, not so hot. And she said, if you need something hot, you have to ask for it hot. So there is the ubiquitous green jalapeno sauce on the table, but she has one that's hotter that she makes herself. So if you need to like feel the burn, if you need to like see the future a little bit when you eat lunch, then ask for the hotter sauce and she will hook you up. Oh, and the other thing that I really loved, there's a lot there to explore, and it's over on 5th Street. Let me just double check the street address, 534 5th Street in Eureka. Another thing that they have is tamales with rice instead of corn. So, and she said there have been a lot of grateful people with corn allergies who are like, yes, it's quite different. It's not an exact swap for a corn tamal. And all I can say is that if you are a person who loves like congee or other kind of like that silky, creamy, cooked down rice, it's like that. It's like custardy and saucy and delightful. And there is a whole dang chicken thigh bone inside with the skin on it. She described it to me as something where you brown the chicken first in a pan, and then you put the rice and the sauce into the banana leaf and stuff the browned chicken thigh into it, wrap it all up, and all of that, it steams like that, and all of that flavor from the chicken stays inside there. So all of that wonderful like chicken gravy flavor goes into the rice, all of the sauce, the flavor of the banana leaf, all of it really comes together, and it's fantastic. Strong recommend for the rice chicken tamal.
I'm just always grateful for all the new cuisines slowly making their way up to our North Coast.
Yeah. And I feel like I have really like, I think I've had like, Guatemalan food like once or twice before, but I haven't really like dove into it. And I feel like I've been missing out, and I'm very excited to like work my way through the menu. And I think it's always fun. Like the wonderful thing about food is you're never done, right?
No.
Even when you think you've got everybody's, you've tried it all, this individual person's take on it is going to be different. There's no end to the exploration. There's no end to discovery. And even if it's something that you've had a million times before, it's always going to be a little bit different. And I just love that.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And thanks for all of those stories, both of you. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up your copy today, read it cover to cover, or, of course, you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community, and have a great week. Thanks.